When I was a teenager, there were games where certain loud opinions and expectations caused me to overlook them. Though in reality, they were more divisive than absolutely bad. As a young, inexperienced human being, unable to filter opinions, the louder, more negative opinions made me believe that these games had nothing to offer me at all. Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter was one of those games. But as an older human being, more open to new perspectives, in a little corner of the internet, in a small space of old RPG lovers, I like to take my time and converse about different things about our shared hobby of video games. And during streams of a first timer to Breath of Fire,
Flashback.
Whoa! Oh my god, she can see his dick!
End of flashback.
I would always say something bad about Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, referencing the second-hand experience I had received from watching my brother play it when I was a young lad of 16 years old. God, this game was released in 2002. Oh god, I'm so old. My memory of this game was a bit weird, trying only very little of it and mostly watching my brother second-hand. From the frustration my brother displayed at the time, I can tell that it was really hard. And due to the trends and articles at the time, I can remember that the visuals of the game back then wasn't really well received. Released in the PS2 on 2003 in the West and a year earlier in Japan, this game began the decline of the Breath of Fire series, and after the release of Breath of Fire 6, the bad reception and ire of a fanbase who at the time had no desire to play a microtransaction-ridden mobile game rendered the series dormant. Starting the game after some narration and some foreshadowing cutscenes, you're prompted to enter a name. I picked for you, of course. In this game, you're a ranger, basically a grunt in an underground city named Shelter, tasked with different duties by the government. Your assigned ratios showing your rank, and you are at 1 over 8,192, the lowest of low ranking, and you're given a mission with your friend Bosch, whose ratio is 1 over 64. I'll give more details about ratios a little later, after talking to some NPC. Huh? What? Oh, you are given your first official mission as a ranger, tasked to go to Biocorp Lab and guard the contents of a freight truck. Once the mission briefing is over, you're given free rein to explore the town Low City. And right away, you may notice one issue with the game. The game requires you an item to save the game. You are allowed to save without one, but this is more akin to a temporary save deleted when you continue from that save. One of the things I discovered with this system is that you can't really play this game in short bursts. You need to at least have an hour or so of free uninterrupted time for some sections of this game. You can risk the temporary save for sure, but it's going to be a waste of time getting a game over near the end of a floor only to lose the last 30 or so minutes of gameplay from your temporary save. The game kind of doesn't respect your time, at least in the earlier sections of this game. After that terrifying realization and the horror that you're actually too poor to purchase anything in the game, you head to the train platform and told that you'll have to walk the destination via tunnels, and this is where you enter your first taste of actual gameplay. So I actually played the first dungeon 30 minutes before my work shift and thought, oh, I have 30 minutes, that's good enough for the opening section of the game. What can possibly go wrong? And luckily, hey, this is a tutorial section. The tutorial encompasses most of the first dungeon, and frankly, I really like the combat for Dragon Quarter. They call it the Positive Encounter System, or PETS. It has tactical RPG movement combined with some traditional turn-based RPG mechanics. Random battles are eschewed, and instead enemies, or in this game genies, are shown on the map, which takes us to another part of the combat. Traps and bait. Traps and bait allow you to either distract an enemy and strike them from behind, getting you one free turn with the character you used, or just continuously hurl bombs and dynamite at them until they actually croak. Some of these items can even cause status effects on your enemies, allowing you to either get the advantage easier or even bypass them altogether. One of the other things I like about this game is the customization. Customization comes from equipping weapons, shields, and armor, each having different effects. You can even change from 3 of your equipped weapons once per battle. You'll probably change weapons the most in combat because of the skills you can assign in weapons, allowing you to create different chains of attacks or combos depending on what enemies you're against. The game sounds fairly simple to understand, right? Anyway, here's a clip of me dying to a group of bats. My inexperience caused me to use too many resources, and my ignorance caused my first failed run in the game to a group of bats. 35 minutes or so in the game. The game then offered me to restart the whole game with my current stats. It will then save your game, then the game will add 1 to your retry counter. This is for sure something that's going to impact the game. So since I'm a person with severe anxiety, I checked if there's any plot that would affect this, and this is what I learned immediately after I restarted from the beginning. Seeing a new scene in where Bosch uses his social status to intimidate your captain. This feature is called the Sol system. What the Sol system actually does is add more context to the story by adding new scenes while you play. These additional scenes are marked with the Sol icon, which should be visible on the bottom right corner of your screen. And if story isn't enough for you, the game will retain any equipment you have linked or stored, and even any abilities you've already learned. This incentivizes players to go back and replay previous levels to get better gear or develop their fairy colony in order to become stronger. And if you have the bank unlocked with the colony, your savings and foreign investments will be safe, allowing you access to items from merchants you didn't have access before. While we're here, let's talk about the game's music. Man, this game's music is amazing. And if you're an RPG fan like myself, it will sound kind of familiar. These tracks were overseen by Yasunori Mitsuda of Chrono Trigger fame and composed by Hitoshi Sakimoto. The man, simply put, is a legend in the industry, known for his works on Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy XII, a lot of the Vanillaware games, all 4 Valkyria Chronicles games, and one of my favorite soundtracks in video games, Vagrant Story. Recognizing his music was an amazing discovery for me. The reason for my excitement is his amazing ability to set the tone and environment in a video game with just his music. And throughout what I've heard while playing this game, I can only really describe it as amazing. My favorite track in the game would be Kind Friends. This song is one of the first songs you hear in the game. It gives off the atmosphere of a weary journey, travelers tired and exhausted from their journey, but isn't afforded rest or comfort. All they have is each other, in a world desperately holding them back from setting themselves free. You can really feel the collaborative effort of Yasunori Mitsuda and Hitoshi Sakimoto in this song. It's just fantastic. Now, before we continue, man, a lot of sidebars, huh? This is where I tell you that you can get off now to avoid spoilers. I'll be spoiling a lot of the major events in the game. I'll set a chapter for the conclusion, but please do come back if you do decide to play the game. Checking back with Low City, we learned that the people in the lower sectors don't know what a sky is, and the fake sky is painted in the ceiling of the city. Going through the tunnels again, I successfully reached Biolabs, and See, the corpse of a dragon hung undignified along with the corpses of genies. A voice then tells Ryu to reach the sky. Bosch wakes up Ryu to see the dragon again in the next room, and Ryu utters the dragon's name, Ajin. Oh, and by the way, there's another element in this game that's not in the other games before this. Ryu can talk. And seeing Ryu throughout the game showing so much personality and fighting through makes me appreciate how much I like the concept of a talking main character. Different from his previous variants who were mostly silent RPG protagonists, and as good as they were for those stories, this Ryu becomes an anchor to convey the story's main themes and narrative. Reaching the train platform for our cargo, Bosch kind of implies that Ryu should commit career sabotage on himself to help out Bosch get reputation to get the promotion. They are then attacked by a Wargenic ridden by a woman whom Bosch identifies is a part of an organization called Trinity. The train is blasted into smithereens and falls into the lower levels of the underground along with Ryu. While unconscious, Ryu sees more visions of Ajin and the man clad in white calling him the 1,000-year world destroyer, destined to change the world. Entering the waste shaft, Ryu sees the Wargenic carrying a pale girl wearing a patient's lab gown. The sight of the girl struggling for her freedom awakens something in Ryu, and in full rage, rush into a fight with the Wargenic to rescue the girl. This is the first boss fight in the game. Fairly simple, it charges and it hits hard. I defeat the boss quite easily. No, not really, I almost died. And Ryu helps the girl stand and asks for her name. The girl, with painful effort, replies, Nina. Ryu recognizing the struggle in her voice. Ryu offers her a hand to hopefully lead her and himself to a relatively safer place, and we move on to explore more of the waste shaft. We're also given the D-dash. It's pretty cool, it makes you move fast and can knock aside enemies. Pretty useful if you want to avoid combat. Now that Nina is in the party, the game now adds a new mechanic to combat: traps. This mechanic allows you to manipulate the battlefield, making enemies either run into them for damage or allows you to route them into a spot where you can knock them into them, and it feels really satisfying to use. This mechanic makes you more aware of your place in the battlefield for more than just throwing Ryu in the face of the enemy and chaining melee attacks. Reaching the third floor of the waste shaft, the game actually doesn't wait very long for you to meet the third member of the party. The woman who attacked the train ambushes you and points a gun at Ryu, demanding that he hand over Nina to her. Nina then refuses to leave Ryu's side. She introduces herself as Lin and forges a truce with Ryu until they reach the end sector. After Lin joins, we see a scene back in the base where Bosch is being reprimanded by Zeno for losing the cargo. He is then instructed to destroy it no matter what it looks like. In the middle of the waste shaft dungeon, a solo event reveals that Lin doesn't even know what Nina is, and she tells Ryu that this world that he and his fellow rangers are protecting isn't really worth preserving. Ryu, in return, closes his eyes in contemplation. The end of the waste shaft is the end sector borough or Junk City, home to scrap and loot.
Hey! No! Stop! Just calm down! Don't do it!
Going back to that earlier Sol event, Junk City is pretty much a decrepit slum that's next to where people in the higher levels of society throw their garbage, deemed too unimportant due to their low D ratios. And you have to ask, Why? The dragon ratio or D ratio, as stated in the fan wiki, is the chance to link with a dragon. This ratio is used by the ruling class of the world of Shelter as a way to classify citizens and determine their rights. People in Junk City have very low D ratios and are left to fend for themselves in a world where wild genies, monsters, and escaped experiments roam. This is also the reason why Bosch asked Ryu to sabotage his job because of his ratio of 1 over 8,192. There was never a chance for Ryu to ever be promoted, better to become cannon fodder for missions that have high risk but low importance. Once you leave the city, you reach the end sector platform, and Ryu, Lin, and Nina are ambushed by Bosch with other rangers armed to teeth. Ryu asks Bosch about Nina, but Bosch instead stabs Ryu's leg, and when Ryu protests further, he is stabbed in the throat mercilessly. Hearing Ajin's voice, Ryu removes the sword from his throat. His eyes reignite with a fiery rage, and the battle begins as we see Ryu transform into a dragon for the first time in this game. This form is powerful, able to drop enemies in seconds, trivializing any challenge this fight would have supposed to even have. After the frankly simply described as a tutorial boss fight, Ryu reawakens and Lin, confused and startled by the situation, then shakes Ryu and asks what kind of ranger Ryu is and what that power he used in the fight. Ryu then rebuts by asking what Trinity knows about Nina and what they'll do to her as Bosch mentions her as cargo. Ryu then describes the power he unleashed, his hands shaking in fear, the overwhelming power coming with the feeling of his humanity slowly being stripped away. Nina then reassures him by holding his hand, then Lin informs that to know what Nina is, they need to head to Bioport, the place that ordered Nina to be destroyed. Let's talk about the Dragon Form for a bit. You may have noticed that on the upper right corner of the screen that numbers have now appeared, and there's a cube policy. Throughout the game, before the cube was always present, it was just some kind of monster radar. But when you did get the D-dash, you can see the cube vibrate and pulse. Now, while in the dragon form, every action, including ending your turn, now increases the percentage that appeared. This is called the D gauge. And now I think I get the reason why some fans don't like considering this as a Breath of Fire game and more of a spin-off. It's not the combat, it's not the graphics, it's not even the dark tone of the story. It's the fact that the game penalizes you for turning into a dragon, one of the main features of Breath of Fire. In Breath of Fire 3, you collect prisms around the world to mix and match an amazing amount of combinations to transform into different types of dragons with different stats and ability. In Breath of Fire 4, you have fantastic animations for every dragon you can use, and the game empowers these forms for interacting with the game's side content. The game incentivizes you to play further to become more powerful. In Dragon Quarter, there is only one form, and it is very powerful. But why would you use it if A, it trivializes parts of the game, and B, it has the potential to kill you and give you a game over? A normal punishment would be fine, but in this game, if the D gauge reaches 100%, you will get a game over and either need to restart with all of your stats or reload, and because you only have one save slot, you will be forced into situations where you will have to restart the game over and over again. And the problem here is not that you have to start over. The problem is that it comes from the reason why Breath of Fire is Breath of Fire. And from Breath of Fire 1 to 4, the game is defined with Ryu, Nina, dragons, and a variety of fantasy races in the world. We do have a variety of fantasy races, but due to the new art style and small spaces, we are not given time to explore a lot of them, and their details are not very noticeable. And the new dragon form as a mechanic is too risky to use because why use them if they make you lose the game anyway? But I think this design not only makes you reserve the dragon form in more important fights, making you fight smarter, but it also gives the dragon form narrative weight. Meanwhile, amidst the group's progress ascending slowly from the end sector, a shadowy group discusses Ryu's awakening from the dragon's powers, one already ordering the rangers to find him. The end of the subway leads us to Low City, the town below the ranger base. The party checks the Biocorp entrance in the city, but sadly it needs an ID to enter. Near this entrance is a bathroom stall? This introduces you to the Fairy Village, a mechanic in the game I mentioned before. The Fairy Village is one of the staples of Breath of Fire. You basically raise a village of fairies, in this case, a weird ant farm, and it gives you access to different facilities like a weapon shop, item shop, a place to train and sell the weird genic things you fight underground, and a hole in the bottom. I wonder what that's for. Anyway, at the end of In This Game, the Fairy Colony tutorial, the fairy gives you a token. While you have a fairy token, you can use it to access the village in safe areas of the game. And if somehow you lose it, the fairy is present in most of the game's major rest spots, ready to give you another token if you need it. Oh, by the way, you lose most of your items if you soul restore, which is kind of a restart but at your last save point. It's not very practical, just reload your save. So what did that have to do with the fairy colony? The progress in this place does not reset. As I mentioned earlier, in the soul system, the game lets you have all of your progress in the fairy colony. Not being able to proceed to Biocorp, the party goes back to Low City, now shrouded in poison. A group of rangers hired by Bosch gas the whole town, believing it gives them an advantage against Ryu, not caring for any of the people who live in the small town of workers. The fight with these rangers are quite simple, but they won't try to chase you, so traps won't be so effective. You're basically fighting a group of griefers, banking on you dying on the poison caused by the gas, using skills that knock you away from them. Luckily, they're not very tanky, and if you learn some magic with Nina, with Lin to snipe the enemies from afar to pick them off, you can leave Ryu to deal with either the more melee-focused enemy or the weenie who keeps using knockback spells at you. Beating them won't be that much of a challenge actually. Defeated, one of the rangers unleashes all of the gas, breaking the valve and taking it as far from Ryu as possible. Ryu tries to get to the ranger and the valve, but he's too far away, weakened by the poison in the earlier fight. Nina, unable to leave him, runs to his side and uses her wings to absorb the poison in Lowtown. Nina now even sicker, Ryu and Lin resolve to go to Biocorp. Using the key left by the rangers, we finally enter Biocorp. You know, the rangers were really horrible, letting Ryu and Bosch use the long and dangerous way earlier in the game. Well, the train was supposed to get them to the delivery platform, but it was broken or whatever, so let's just keep moving. Now, here in Biocorp, I committed a giant mistake. I did not pay attention. In this area, there are these enemies called Rafflesias. They power up with magic damage. I accidentally powered them up to the point that I can't actually damage them normally anymore. I tried using the dragon form and ended up raising my D gauge to 50%. The doubled XP wasn't even worth it. Well, that's definitely going to affect this run down the line. We continue on to Biocorp and reach the room where Nina was experimented on. She gazes on the operating table where the doctors did experimentations on her. She quakes in fear. A scientist enters the room and calls her an experimental genie, a ventilator, a living air purifier. To them, she isn't even a person. She's a product. A prototype who's now too broken and worn. Ryu punches the scientist in disgust, swearing to save Nina and reach the sky. Exiting Biocorp leads us to an ice cavern. And I think now is a good time to explain why I don't really narrate what exploring feels like in the game. Well, to put it simply, it's very straightforward and simple. There are side roads, and the layout of most maps allow you to plan out attacks and setting traps. Sometimes these are closed areas locked down by D ratio. How to access these doors, you will have to stick to the end to know. Since the layouts are simple, they're easy to remember, and with the help of the game's map, if you've already restarted the game a few times, any knowledge you have allows you to skip any fights you don't think you need to take, or be able to get back to the items you think you'll need. After the fight with some winged frogs, near the end of the cavern, is a scene with Ryu and Lin. Ryu asks Lin if, like the doctor, Lin sees Nina as an object. She's not sure what to say about it. Still indignant at how the Biocorp doctor treated Nina, Ryu is determined to find the sky, not even knowing if such a thing exists in their world. Finally reaching the storage floor, the three are surrounded by rangers. They've fallen into a trap, planned by the rangers, led by Violet Zeno, your captain. They gaslight Ryu, telling him Nina is causing hallucinations, and he's in an unstable state. Ajin screams that they're lying, because obviously they are. This is workplace gaslighting. We've all been there. I know because they brought a lot of guards to this location. This is not a boss fight. It's a boss marathon. And I think this is one of the game's earliest filters. If you have no desire to finish this game, you will not pass it through this series of fights. The first fight is of 8 rangers, 3 melee with shields and 5 gun rangers with support magic. Fairly simple, zone them out and beat the gunmen first. Shield guys are a bit thick but manageable. Then, the absolutely boring drill mech that summons 2 droids and has 2 attacks. Push and drill slam. There's another attack but I don't remember if I triggered it. It barely even attacks, and when you're near it, it just keeps summoning droids. If you have the frag ball and blow up skills, this is a fairly easy and boring fight. Easy and boring is the worst experience in a video game. Now the last one. The one with your Captain Zeno. She will chase Nina with unwavering fervor. So with the frag ball skill and Lin's out of my way skill to reset her position and make her move towards the traps. You can then use Ryu to clear out the 2 mage rangers she has with her, no problem. You know, I said no problem, but this is actually the place where I discovered that the soul restore function is not very practical. I actually restored once and just reloaded on my 3rd attempt. I avoided some of the fights in the cavern just to have more resources for this marathon. This is actually harder than it sounds. After the fight, Ryu drops down in exhaustion, hearing another voice, claiming he's the 1000-year destroyer. Lin suggests our next destination. As Ryu is now being hunted by rangers, they have no choice but to ask help from the Trinity group, the terrorist group Lin is a part of. Not having any other choice, he agrees to go. The next section, the storage floors, are longer than usual, mostly dealing with robots and bandits. One of the bosses we'll encounter is a ranger with a beehive face. His name is Tantra, and he does some weird ass shit. He's very wary of traps and won't move unless he has to. He also has the tendency to rain down long-range magic, debuffs, and the drain attack that heals for a lot. We'll learn that from Lin. Tantra is part of a Black Ops section of the Rangers trained for assassinations. Oh yeah, Tantra is still alive. He does jump scare thing after we leave the room where we fought him on.
Oh no! Anyway.
If you received a soul scene, you'll learn that this person, along with two other guys, was hired by a girl revealed to be one of the regents. She then asks their leader why they need to do this, and this is so weird. Just play the clip. Basically, the world is in order as long as he and everyone in shelter is suffering?
That's really dumb. But he's so cool! But that's so dumb!
Continuing further with the storage floors, depending on where you go next, you'll face one of the two dudes Tantra was with. Beating them will, spoiler alert, let him inherit what annoying trait that boss will have. Igagis, the huge dude, will have a ton of defense, but is very vulnerable to traps and magic. The other guy, Digon, hits much harder, is very fast, and can deal different kinds of status effects, but has a normal set of defenses so you can just attack as you would normal enemies. If you beat Gigagis, Tantra will inherit his annoying defense, but as long as you're smart with traps, you'll be fine. Also, Ryu has the thrust attack, which ignores defense and has 100% accuracy, so we can just poke him endlessly. If you beat the other guy, Tantra will have some of the status effect attacks he had before. Oh, you can also beat both of his partners and have a giant headache if you want to. Also, I have no idea what race Tantra is. He has the weirdest beehive face. Maybe he's a grass man? After we beat Tantra and reach the mid-sector mall, we see a scene where Bosch is planning to craft a genic arm into himself. This is certainly a good idea. We enter the old trade sector, and it's revealed that they're being followed by someone. The dude's a regent. Anyway, the next level, the old trade sector, is a terrible place filled with undead monsters that only die if you kill their souls. This place actually changes the looks of the dungeon you're in. In the previous floors were very warehouse-like or very industrial facilities with just different kinds of machinery. This place is a post-apocalyptic mall, like the name implies, Old Trade Sector, inferring that this place used to be a functioning area of shelter, and makes me wonder how Biocorp, the Rangers, and the Regents maintain these areas. Just remember that this place is on a higher level than the Ranger headquarters, and it looks like it's on rougher shape than any other parts of the underground. Maybe it's because this is Trinity's territory? Ryu and company does reach Trinity headquarters, but Nina faints in exhaustion and is placed in a bed covered in plastic, preventing her from absorbing any more pollution in the air. Ryu then meets with Mabeth, the ratio 1/4 leader of Trinity. Mabeth tells Ryu that Nina can't live long with the pollution underground, but they can help her with whatever medicine or facilities they have. Ryu then replies that she can be better if they reach the sky, but Mabeth posits that there might not even be a sky to pursue, and that he's risking her life on a baseless theory. Mabeth invites Ryu to stay and think about this offer. Now, do you remember what I said about the dragon form having some narrative weight? After talking to Mabeth, Ryu, still terrified of the dragon's power, describes to Lin what using Ajin's power feels like, sapping his life in exchange for devastating destructive powers. He can feel himself dying, and this terrifies him. This and the earlier description of his humanity slowly being taken away gives off the impression that Ajin, intentionally or not, may be taking away more than he intended. Suddenly, that one scene in the ice cavern where Ryu is resting and you see Nina running energetically becomes a foreshadowing of a terrible conclusion. This powerful ability that enables you to steamroll enemies along with the D-gauge, now coming with the risk of not just Ryu's life ending, but your game running into an irreparable state that at best will cause you to go back, or worse, make you quit. Nina screams from where she's being treated, and we find that she's being attacked by Trinity members. I'm not sure if I can call this a boss fight. They're basically glorified mooks. After the last one, Ryu and Lin confront Mabeth, and he confesses to orchestrating this attack, wanting to kidnap Nina and use Ryu against the Regents. Acknowledging that he's lost, Mabeth Wait, have I been saying that wrong? Huh, could be worse. Mabeth gives Ryu a key and sends him off. After escaping the Trinity hideout and clearing a bit more floors, we're faced with Bosch, who grafted genic parts onto himself to try and match Ryu's dragon form. Now, remember that using the dragon form will get you a game over eventually if you overuse it. Guess what this boss fight wants you to do? This boss fight forces you to use it, because unless you have the ability to deal 250 damage under one turn, he will keep regenerating all of the damage you give him. So that's a guaranteed 20% to your death gauge. It's kind of disappointing too, because the last few boss fights with Tantra and Captain Zeno was actually pretty good. At that time, I just figured out that she would run towards Nina, so I took advantage of that and used the game's mechanics. This one just forces you to do more damage, or else! Then he falls to his death. And am I supposed to feel bad? No. Bosch was horrible. An opportunistic ass who took advantage of his social rank and D ratio. Oh wait, he's still alive, never mind. I guess we need to fight him again. After that long fight, we've reached the top sector, home of people with the highest D ratios. We've never actually been able to explore the residential sections of the top sector, so we really have no idea how they live. Actually, most of the living spaces we are allowed to see are the slums from the lower levels and the starting point low city. But the mere fact that we are not allowed to enter kind of tells more a lot of their society. These arbitrary ratios barring people from basic living amenities. The next dungeon you'll explore is called Power 1, the power plant that distributes power to all of Shelter. It's another industrial type looking level that doesn't really have anything much special other than the boss, Daemon, your first official fight with a regent. Daemon is a pain. Having a barrier worth 300 damage you need to wear down before actually doing damage. What's tricky about this is that you can't stop attacking, and the damage must be done continuously or the barrier will reset. Diamond is certainly one of the hardest boss fights in the game, but with a little patience, you can actually beat him without even using the dragon form. We get another key from him and finally enter the center, the domain of Shelter's rulers, the Regents. The center is one of the two unique levels in the game. The other one's the Ruined Mall. This place is a palace, out of place from the industrial levels that the game presented so far. Even the aforementioned Ruined Mall of the Old Trade District fit in because of the game's setting. The palace setting shows how detached the Regents are from the rest of the people living below them. There's nothing here but strong monsters and the Regents who will eventually stand in your way. We are then met with our next Regent, Cupid, asking Ryu to turn back, claiming his mission to reach the sky was nothing more than Ajin's influence. The battle starts and you're faced with Cupid and Oncot, a monster who doesn't seem to be vulnerable to anything. They one-shot me. Now, here's the problem. In the center, there are points where you won't be able to go back where you came from. Some part of the game does allow you to do so, and some don't. Do you remember my mistake earlier? If I didn't make that mistake in Biocorp, that I accidentally raised my D gauge to 50+%, I would have more leeway to use the dragon form in Cupid's fight. But given my D gauge is already at a dangerously high level already at 79%, making me horribly unprepared for everything else the game is going to offer moving forward. I promise you, I eventually decided to restart. And do you know how many hours that last playthrough was? All of that narration? That was 17 hours worth. Almost a full RPG. But here's the thing. You're not meant to finish this game in one run. I'm pretty sure someone has done so. I know what speedrunners do. But this game is designed for replays. It lets you start with your linked and stored items, and when you access the fairy colony again, you still have everything you have. Normally, getting to a place where you can't proceed anymore after 14 hours is a deal breaker to most players, and maybe I'm speaking out of my ass, but I think people just don't like the idea of losing progress like this. And it's very understandable. I've known people who've been stuck in one part of the game only to let it go and just move on to another new game. And back when I did that devastating restart, I don't even remember what possessed me to replay the game again, but I did. Spoilers, I finished this game in October. I'm rating this in January, and I can still remember the excitement I felt racing back to the top. I didn't want Ryu, Nina, and Lin to be stuck in one part of the center in my mind. Like them, I think I just wanted to see what the promised sky is. Whether it was a devastated world or something completely different, I just want to see how everything ends. So, I restarted the game, and the soul system activates, with a scene of Nina being given the wings that were meant to absorb pollution. Now the game starts as normal, except I have better gear and some party XP. The fairy also appears in Low City, giving you a chance to customize a bit more before heading out. And from this point up to the first time Ryu transformed into a dragon, that took me 3 hours to achieve. In this, it's 58 minutes. But that doesn't really take away from any of the experience you can have with the game. Thanks to the soul system, you're still seeing new story, and since you're only overleveled up to a certain point, you won't be able to steamroll through the game, preserving the game's challenge. You can even have opportunities to fight hidden encounters that offers items that helps you climb faster. When they reach the storage floors again and beat Xeno's ambush, continuing forward got me a new scene, showing a young Bosch being forced to fight a genie 10 times his size. The scene shows his father telling Bosch that he has power, and the child, bathed in the blood of the genie, is shown victorious but traumatized. Beating Tantra twice again shows another scene with Bosch being taunted by another ranger for running away from the ranger ambush organized by Xeno. Enraged that the ranger points out that he lost to Ryu, Bosch cuts off the ranger's hand, and this shows the start of Bosch's downfall. This gives more context to what we saw previously, in where he requests a genic arm to be grafted onto himself. We get to Bosch's fight again, and I think we have to talk about one of the more glaring flaws of this game. There is no strong antagonistic force that has a strong link with the game's story. You can say it's Bosch because of what the narration said, but he's not really compelling. Just a twisted, traumatized kid who became a terrible human being thanks to the way he was raised. You can say it's the Regents and their leader, but the Regents don't have much character, and their leader was too hidden in the shadows, which is a shame because the leader's design is really good. He doesn't get much characterization from the Soul scenes, but they do reveal that they're using Folu's unused design from Breath of Fire 4. And that's quite a shame because this game has a very powerful message to it. An antagonist that has a strong narrative counter-argument to Ryu's desire to help Nina reach the sky would have given more for the story. Speaking of Bosch, remember when I mentioned that you needed the dragon form in this fight? Thanks to Diamant's fight, I was able to beat Bosch without using the dragon form. Sure, it took more time, but thanks to that, I'm now free to use the dragon form in more challenging parts of the game. After another tussle with the first Regent and the first level of Center, I reach Cupid again, and it looks like Oncut, Cupid's giant bodyguard, is just invulnerable. And when Cupid is cornered, use any buffer items you find in the center and have Ryu and Nina do all of the damage against them. Like Diamant, she has a barrier that needs to be worn out before being damaged, but if you buffed up and is well prepared, damaging them won't be a problem at all. Beating them grants us another key, and from here on out, sadly, we can no longer go back to any previous floors. My favorite boss fight would probably be with this Regent, Jesuit. He can turn invisible, which makes him untargetable until he walks into a trap. Also, his barrier isn't insanely thick, so his fight doesn't go for as long as Cupid's or Diamant's fights. Just skip some turns to collect AP and protect yourself properly using traps and the game's movement, and you're pretty much golden. It's a legitimately fun boss fight. We beat Jesuit and reach the conference room the Regents use in the cutscenes. That's really cool. Beyond this room is an area called the Cemetery, where we use the 3 keys we have on stone slabs. That unlocks a chamber with another stone slab where we use Maveth's key. And finally, reaching the Geolift, the game lets you prepare for what will come next. Before we move on, I want to first talk about the reception and the final criticisms I have with the game. Unfortunately, the game was not received well at the time, and to this day, still has many detractors, with many people not liking the D-gauge system, and the few people who did not want to learn the mechanics of the game not even giving it the time of day. The visuals, though not bad, made one aspect of this game, the diverse cast of fantasy races, become almost unrecognizable. Not to mention that this game has a weak cast of antagonists, whether it be the Regents or Bosch. The game excels in its music, the gameplay, and the main cast's mission separated from their obstacles. The combo system has very few variations. The Soul system hides a lot of story elements. Bosch as a rival doesn't make any sense. The very rough early game. This is a good game, that just got held back by a few flaws. And every game can be held back by flaws. But in the memory of those who love them, the best moments will always shine through. At the moment, there is no other way of owning the game unless you have a PS3. Although I'm not sure if you can still buy it, I have checked it recently. Through the power of emulation and fan preservation efforts, this game has become a cult classic. If it wasn't at all obvious after all my replays of this game, I have gained a deep respect for this game and all of the people who made it. This section was originally near the end, but it would leave the video on a sour note, and I didn't want that. When I began this project, I had no expectations at all. What I had was some childhood memories and comments and chat room messages. I let myself see the game with eyes unclouded by hate. Ryu, feeling weak from the struggles and obstacles they faced in the previous floors, asks Lin to show Nina the sky. He can feel Ajin's power draining him. And we're faced with Elion, leader of the Regents, the one who bars mankind from reaching the surface, Ajin's previous host. Since this is the final fight, I thought, might as well use the dragon form. And since I reached this place under a 20% gauge, I can just splurge on using the dragon form. So I decharge to boost damage, and with a few vortexes and twisters on the guy, you're done. Unfortunately, he's not the final boss. For the previous avatar of Ajin and the leader of the Regents, it's unfortunate that he didn't have much scenes in the game. He may have had more, but thanks to the soul system, I wouldn't know. No, the final boss is Bosch. If you were able to see some of the soul scenes like I did, Bosch is really a character. But it doesn't really make him more sympathetic or interesting. He's an asshole, and he's been an asshole even before Ryu and Ajin bonded. He was an asshole after he bonded with Shetre. Yes, he was abused by his father at a very young age, but that's about it. Throughout the story, he's been an abusive bully who parades and abuses his status. He even asks Ryu to throw himself under the bus so he can get the promotion. I get that comes from his dad being a regent or something, but he's never given any more dimensions other than that. You fight Bosch in his first form, the normal human mode. That's stupid because I'm at the end of the game and I have a very low D gauge even after Elion's fight. He gets his ass beat, but then he transforms into his dragon form. Ooh, I'm so surprised. Anyway, I beat his ass again because I do have a low D gauge. Then it's kind of revealed what Bosch really is. He's an obstacle. He was never a goal, barely even a rival. The goal was to reach the sky and save Nina. Shetre, the dragon that bonded with Bosch, reveals his intentions. He wants to reach the sky and burn everything below it because he's also an asshole. Wow! Him and Bosch are really compatible. And you think that these battles would make me hate the game? No, not really. The fight itself is well designed, and if you opted not to use the dragon form, I think you'd have an enjoying challenge. Bosch as an obstacle is a good obstacle. He's not a good rival, but he's a good obstacle. The selfish monster being consumed by another selfish monster. We start a seemingly third fight, now with Shetre taking full control and assuming a full dragon form, and with Ryu starting in his dragon form. No melee attacks can reach him. There is only one attack we can use: D-Fire. D-Fire is an attack that keeps damaging the enemy but rapidly increases your D-gauge. Practically unusable anywhere else in the game. Shetre, aiming to kill Nina and Lin, charges to fire a blast of energy. Finding no other way to save them, Ryu jumps down feigning to hit Kshetriya from another angle. Seeing this, Kshetriya realigns and aims for Ryu. He counters with his own fire. 100%, 115, 140, 150. Going beyond his limit, Ryu keeps firing, sacrificing his life to save Nina and Lin. Losing the clash, Kshetriya is destroyed. Dragon Quarter is a story about hope and determination, a reassurance that your goodwill isn't wasted. I think the reason people who stand by this game vehemently do so because this is a game about doing an insurmountable task, not because you were told to, but because you want to. You stood by Ryu when he was angry at the scientist. You felt relief every time Nina is re-energized. The mission to reach the sky didn't start when Ajin linked with Ryu. It started when he saved Nina from the War Genie. The goal only became clearer when we saw her treatment from the scientists. Ajin, in the end, tells Ryu that it wasn't his influence that made him climb all the way to the surface. It was his determination. It was all him. It was all because he wanted to help Nina. After all those hours grinding on the game and unlocking those cutscenes, finally reaching the sky with your comrades, it feels wonderful. The world above the underground dungeon you were climbing was not a wasteland. It wasn't a desert. It wasn't a ruined city. It was a beautiful green paradise. Ajin fades, and Ryu opens his eyes. Mankind has finally reached the sky. With the golden age Capcom is experiencing at this time, plus the poll they recently received from players, I do hope that this game finds some sort of remaster or re-release. GOG even has a new dreamlist thing that asks people what games they want restored for a non-DRM release. This game has a few votes right now, but it's pretty good and I hope people do give it a chance. People always debate and dismiss the existence of this game, and I can't promise that people will have the same experiences I did in this game. But after climbing through the underground city and finally reaching the sky, I gotta say, I think this game deserves to be Breath of Fire 5. The story is a Breath of Fire game. It has the heart of a Breath of Fire game. But like the dragon form in this game, a lot of structure in the game is held back by baffling game mechanics that I don't think was properly implemented. I do not think this game is garbage like some people want to claim. But I don't think this game is perfect either. The earlier section is evident of that. But even after all of that, I love this game, flaws and all. This essay being written 3 months after I finished the game. I've played fantastic games ever since. But this game, this story still lingers in my mind. Ryu's determination to reach the sky kind of affected me as well. As no matter how cruel the situation we may face, no matter what obstacle the world keeps throwing in our way, sometimes all we can do is rest with our kind friends and keep moving to that ever-elusive sky.
今日の太陽優しい暖かを持ってるね